Next thing you'll see is, I've mentioned it in this book, appendices or appendix. Appendix is one, appendices are multiple. You don't have to have those, but often they can be really, really helpful. For example, let's say for more military history, I want to see the full order of battle. I want to see the entire thing laid out of what each side had. Which, by the way, of course, is far more than they had at the time. You don't really know what the other side has completely. You may guess what they've got. You may have good intelligence on what they've got. But there's a lot of things that people miss. And even on your own side, there may be units that are available, but for whatever reason didn't get into the battle. Here's one example. One of the orders of battle presented here in the Grant book talks about one of the regiments on the Union side, the 20th Ohio, as being there at the Battle of Fort Donelson, the siege and capture of Fort Donelson. If you go to the official records, it's not there. So I've got a regiment on my order of battle in there that they don't have in the official records. And people are going, Dana, didn't you just say you don't want to make stuff up? That's right, you don't. But how did I figure that out? When I was looking for battle flags to show as samples of what they were carrying at the time, one of the really good ones that's preserved is the 20th Ohio. I thought, cool, because they are eventually later in Grant's army. But they have right there, stenciled onto the flag, sewn onto it is Fort Donelson. And I'm looking at that like, it's not in the official records. Did they just make this up? Did a regiment just literally say, we're there, right? They can't do that, not for long. That'll get yanked off right away. So what happened? This was like a little detective story, because I had to figure out, why do they get to put on their battle flag, which is a big deal, that they were at Fort Donelson. And here's what happened. So when I went to get the regimental history that they wrote up after the war, it said that they arrived the day the Confederates attacked. So two things. One, they were not officially assigned to anybody yet. So when someone's filling out that sheet at the end of the day, or 2 days later, whenever they did it, 20th Ohio's not on that list, is it? Because it hadn't been officially assigned to anybody. So there was no brigade, there was no division, there was no one up the chain of command to say that was our regiment. So when the official records are collected years afterwards, and they look down that list, who's not on it? The 20th Ohio. But wait, it gets better, because the 20th Ohio didn't get into combat. Here's what happened. They came up in reserve behind. Everything was chaos. Confederates are attacking, trying to break their way out of the encirclement, right? And they're pushing back the Union forces, and they're pushing back the Union forces, and the 20th Ohio comes up at the very end of this, and the Confederates run out of gas and retreat. Okay? So they were literally one line in front of them. Had that line been pushed back, or had it started to disintegrate, the 20th Ohio would have been in it. But because they did not get in the fight, they were there, but they didn't get into the fight. Never had to fire their weapons in anger at Fort Donelson, because the next day the Confederates surrendered. So this is one of those situations. Why would I include it? Why? Most histories don't. That's because one of the things I think is important as a game designer and as a historian is, what do you have available? What could get into the fight? Not just what did get into the fight, but what could have gotten into the battle. Well, obviously the 20th Ohio could have gotten into the fight. It was available, it was there, it just didn't end up fighting. And you'd be surprised how many battles, there are a lot of units that do not end up fighting. For whatever reason, they're guarding a flank, they're in reserve, and they never need to be called forward. Are those units available? Well, of course they are. Did they fight? Well, maybe not. But that doesn't mean you don't count them. And there's a notation on the 20th Ohio that explains why it's on the order of battle, because of what little story I just told you, which means this book now has an order of battle that no other book on Fort Donelson has. Okay? Yes. I am very proud of that little factoid that we were able to figure out. And again, it's detective work. If you think of it, you do a lot of research as a historian. You have to put together a story. And that means you have to find all the pieces that are available or were available to the generals at the time, and what happened and why it happened. Either they did get into it or not. So that's just one example of what kind of work goes into something as simple as a 2-page order of battle. Let's go to the next piece. What happens if you keep moving forward? Well, obviously you come to the conclusion of the book. So now the author is going to tell you what is his opinion, right? This is what he thinks. And you read the first paragraph or you skim through it, and he says, I hate this guy. I've always hated him as a general. I think he's terrible, and I wrote this book. Well, that tells you something right there. It tells you that he's probably not going to have an objective book. He's not going to take information that even makes this general look good, is he? He's going to take only the stuff that makes this guy look bad, or that even created situations, or only takes testimony by other generals who were jealous or hated this guy, and that's all he's going to show you. So now you have to think, this is not going to be a fair, unbiased approach, is it? That's why the conclusion is so important. If, on the other hand, he says, I thought this when I first started doing this book. And now, and I've actually gone through and done the research, I actually see this. And that, to me, is a lot more valuable because it's showing that he has an open mind. He was trying to learn, and he learned something of it, and he's sharing what he learned with the reader. That's huge. And you can get that just by reading the first couple of paragraphs in a conclusion. And now you can determine whether, wow, this whole book is just nothing but this guy's ranting and raving about, somebody he doesn't like. Okay, if you keep moving forward, maps. Obviously, there should be maps. No, obviously, there are not. This is the worst piece of news I've ever had as a person that loves military history, is I have purchased too many books that have no maps. Not few maps. We're talking 0. One of the reasons I did this book on Grant's maps in color is so that even if you're reading somebody else's book and you don't have any maps in it, or not enough maps, or not enough detailed maps, and certainly no color maps, you can use this book to see what they're talking about. There's nothing worse than trying to read a chapter about a part of a battle, and then you don't have a map to follow. Well, then they went to this way, and then they went over here, and then they went through this village, and then they went to this lake. And it's like, I don't have a map. It's meaningless to me. It doesn't matter. I mean, he could have gone to Candyland. It could have done anything. But if you don't even have a map, how do you know, and how can you visualize everything? In fact, here's an interesting quote from Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay? That's very, very old saying that is absolutely true. He believed that telling his story, propaganda, through paintings, and that's what people got. That was their movies back then, right? Was really important because they were trying to impress people with an exciting moment out of a battle or why it went his way. He had someone paint that. And then people would come in and they'd wander around and they'd get to the story. There'd be someone narrating the whole thing, and you get to see maybe that and maybe several other paintings that were done. And these were not small. We're talking about huge, huge paintings of a battle, okay? Fit on an entire wall. So he knew the value of propaganda, and he knew the value of a picture or a painting or however you want graphics, whatever you want to talk about. And how you can tell a story, especially a history story, without any maps is incredible. One of the other things, I already dissed this book. He's going to get another one now, okay? So he has maps, okay? There's a map, not very big, okay? There are a few maps that are full page. And he, by the way, probably had to pay for this. This is the bad news today, is that publishers don't have maps in their books because they're expensive. If all you have is words, then you don't need maps because they sell as many books. At least they think they do. So the problem is that if you don't have, there's a lot of tiny little detail in here. There's words here that like 4-point type. You can barely see it. That's not the worst of it. Somebody needed to proofread this because the text all says that the Russian Third Army blah, blah, blah. Third Army blah, blah, blah. Third Army blah, blah, blah. And right here it says Russian Fourth Army. It's like, that's somebody did not communicate to each other, did they? Somebody really messed up. And then you wonder, well, if you get something as basic as that wrong, then what else is wrong on the map, right? If you can't even get the right army, what else is wrong? So These were proofread. That's one of the important things that people don't realize. What does an editor do? What does a proofreader do? What does a copy editor do? There are a lot of people involved in creating a book, and sometimes it's just simple that you just said over here that this guy was the aide to Grant, and now you've got somebody else. What happened to that guy? That's what a proofreader does, because they have fresh eyes. They check things like that. Not just spelling, there are spell checkers, but also you want to make sure that you're using the right grammar. Doesn't check grammar, okay? There. Okay? Same sounding word, very different meanings, all right? So having someone copy edit, or proofread is really important, and an editor does a lot of important things too. When we created this book, all those parts that I'm going to tell you about had to come together, and I'm going to come back to the editor at the end of this talk to explain why it is so important that an editor is involved in the process, and why a lot of publishers no longer have editors at all. Okay, the next one. So we find maps through the book, illustrations. Well, that's kind of cool. Every book's good about illustration. No. This one is really good because they made an effort that every French general that has a biography has a picture. In this case, that was a sketch done by Keith Rocco, a very famous American artist who loves the Napoleonic era. He's very good, and he drew a likeness of each of those generals. So at least you can see what he looks like. That's good. But there are books like on World War II, for example, and there'd be an interesting picture. I mean, it's really good-looking picture, and it says American soldiers. That's the caption. It's like, what? American soldiers doing what? From what division? Where are they going? Are they in rest area? Have they just been in battle? Are they excited about going into a battle? I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can say about a picture and to tell people what they're looking at. Why did you pick this photograph? Why did you have this painting done? I mean, literally, there's a reason for all this. And if you don't explain that in the caption, some people seem to be afraid to do anything more than say, General whatever. Okay, so that's General whatever. Is it right? Is that what he looked like at the time? Is that what he looked like 20 years after the battle? You know, and who are those guys standing next to them, and why are they taking this picture? I mean, there's a story. There's lots of stories involved in photographs and images. And if you're not telling that in the captions, you're failing to communicate those stories. So if you've seen the same pictures over and over and over again, that's also boring. If they make an effort to find some new photos you've never seen or something that's unique, and they have a great explanation, a caption that explains why I'm showing you this tank, why I'm showing you this weapon, why I'm showing you these soldiers or these leaders, right? If that's in the book, that's a big plus. It means that they have thought this out to nth degree down to the littlest detail.